The first engagement is a wild bird's eye view of a Ukrainian tank facing off against a Russian T-72B3 and 3 enemy anti-tank guys.
At least the Ukrainian one is super old compared to the Russian ones, but I guess it won't matter.
Guided missile teams targeting that Ukrainian tank. The Russian tank pushes forward along the Ukrainian trench line when it hits an anti-tank landmine that explodes right underneath it. It was a mobility kill. The T-72 is unable to move. Its track has been destroyed.
Yeah.
That's very bad for the tank's health when that happens. The TM-62 is the most common anti-tank mine. It uses a brute force explosion, often not enough to penetrate the armor, but it has no problem blowing the tracks off, which explains why the Russian tank crew inside survived the hit. In between them is a fortified trench line that loops all the way around. This is where a squad of Ukrainian soldiers have taken...
They got actual coordinates of where it happened. Pretty crazy.
Cover from the armored tank duel. We see a Ukrainian infantryman pop out of a trench here on the left of the screen, just about 25 meters away from the tank, and they brave it. They fire an RPG shot at the disabled tank, going for the final finish him style kill. But the RPG is fired wide and misses the tank completely. It explodes to the right in the field about 100-150 meters away. The adrenaline in a moment like this for a soldier who's firing like that is a major factor. That and not wanting to jump out of cover of a trench for too long can make it very difficult to get a steady aim. The Russian tanker exits his vehicle, briefly checks the status of the tank, not aware that he's still under fire from very close range, and it appears like he takes off his kit, and he's able to escape right off camera to the right unharmed. It's unclear if he was the only one in the tank, but it seems likely. In the background, 20 meters behind the Russian tank, we can see Ukrainian soldiers moving through the trench line, trying to get an angle on the Russian tank, but they don't see that the crew has escaped. This is when the Ukrainian tank opens fire. The round impacts the disabled, empty Russian tank, and you can see bits of it ricocheting and hitting all around. It appears to have been an anti-tank round instead of a high explosive one, because we can see the munition exited straight through the Russian tank, went straight through, and impacted about 100 meters to the right off screen there. We actually just see the smoke hit kick up. A T-72 fires a 125mm APF SDS round, which is essentially a high-velocity dart moving at 1,700 meters per second. That thing is flying fast. The Sabo peels off mid-flight, and the tungsten or DU penetrator hits the enemy tank. When it pierces the armor, it sends spalling fragments from the armor everywhere. It's partly meant to either shred the crew inside or disable the tank. It's capable of going through around 700mm of armor, depending on conditions. In this case, it impacts the weaker side of the Russian armor, just below the turret, which is likely around 50mm of protection because it's pretty weak there, but it could be upwards of 120mm. We zoom out and see the Ukrainian tank is in a bold move near the trench line. It's extremely rare and unusual to see armored units moving this close to a trench even when this footage was recorded in May of 2023. The first thing that stands out to me is this is an intersection with 3 high-speed avenues of approach, which makes it a very dangerous kill zone. The positioning of those Russian anti-tank teams is perfect for an ambush. The Ukrainian tank then at this point begins to take heavy fire from 3 separate Russian ATGM teams. These are anti-tank guided missiles. 3 smoke clouds kick up where incoming missiles miss their targets. The Ukrainian tank scores a direct ammo hit on that shot, and the enemy tank's rounds begin to cook off inside, sending a giant flame jet up into the air. They're able to fire at about 6 to 8 rounds per minute with their autoloader. Then the first of the 3 Russian anti-tank guided missile teams fires their Kornet missile at the Ukrainian tank. The first round misses. That missile impacts the ground about 50 meters short. A piece of missile actually bounces in front of the tank, as you can see there, which is crazy. The second Russian ATGM team fires a missile strike and it hits the tree stump, and we see that activates the jet stream of its shape charge. The warhead is then detonated and fires a high velocity metal copper jet, which we actually get to see here in real time. That copper jet, that smoke cloud that's pluming forward, is moving extremely fast at about 7 kilometers per second. Watch what happens here. It's absolutely crazy. Extremely close call with that
lucky.
anti-tank guided missile, just barely misses the Ukrainian tank by a few feet and then hits the ground next to it. Then the drone tries to fix the location of where those Russian ATGM teams are. The next battle just happened last week in the town of Seversk, where Russia's offensive has so far been stalled. It shows even in the world of drones, tank-on-tank violence still happens.
Right.
You can see the Ukrainian tank on the bottom left and the Russian tank on the top left of the screen. The Ukrainian tank spots the Russian turtle tank and chases after them. They're getting intelligence from the drone that's watching them overhead. This battle shows us there are pros and cons to having overhead drone protection, like this shed tank that Russia's using. The cons are that it has limited visibility and limited turret mobility. The Russian tank cannon is stuck in one position facing forward with maybe 40 degrees of visibility
That's
directly
funny.
in front of them. Take a look at this battle geolocated to the exact field in Seversk that this happened in. It's tough to tell from the drone footage, but the terrain between these two tanks is a forest patch that the Russian tank cannot see over. The Ukrainian tank takes one shot, which explodes with a giant display of sparks on the turtle tank. The Russian tank begins to reverse, with a huge plume of smoke coming out of it. The munition that the Ukrainian tank fired is a heat round, meaning high explosive anti-tank munition. Just based on the fireball and sparks on impact, that's what suggests that this is heat. Unlike Sabo rounds, they deliver a shape charge with that focused explosive energy. What you're looking at here traveling at the enemy tank is the 3BK-18M, which is one of the types of heat rounds fired by the T-64. Upon impact with the enemy, a nose fuse triggers, and then the explosive charge with that penetrative jet of high explosive molten metal to shoot straight into the tank, killing the crew, creating small
Bunch of basically just cooks the whole crew inside, dude.
everywhere. It also just destroys a bunch of the interior of the tank and can set off munitions. Generally speaking, the pros of this type of tank ammo versus your APF SDS is that the heat is effective at any range, so its penetration doesn't degrade over distance because it's not relying on kinetic energy. It also has a multi-role purpose, so gunners can use it against soft targets, which is my favorite euphemism for humans. Sometimes I call my friends, I'm like, hey, you soft targets want to come over tonight? If I had friends. Or fortified positions and helicopters. But it's more easily defeated by explosive reactive armor and composite armor. It's got less penetration at around 600 millimeters versus that Sabo. From later battle damage assessments, the Russian tank here was finished off by a Ukrainian drone afterwards. But according to the YouTube channel Such Omosis, which where I found this footage at originally, this was the first ever recorded instance of a Ukrainian tank destroying a turtle tank because tank-on-tank violence is so rare nowadays.
Wow, yeah.
And then in the next engagement comes from the point of view of an onboard camera attached to
Because all it is drones now. We don't do tank-on-tank as much. Like you said, it's super rare. Doesn't ever happen anymore. Like I said, tanks they still play their role, but they're definitely pretty much you still need them for like gaining ground in certain situations, but like 90% of them probably are outdated, right?
Ukrainian tank from the 25th Brigade that were fighting in the tree lines of the Kherson region. The date isn't known, but appears to be from the 2022, most likely from when they were initially retaking the city of Kherson. The commander of the tank is looking around trying to spot targets of opportunity. Visibility in this region is relatively good, so they fire 6 shots at a tree line that could be a couple of clicks away, and we see their autoloader in action. Ideal engagement range, given limitation of some optics, is about 1,500 meters, but they can push out further than that, although this engagement we're going to see gets much closer than that. Here is where it gets insane though. A Russian column of vehicles starts heading straight toward them. It's like a mad dash, crazy sprint forward. The gunner opens up with the Dishka, which is like a 50 caliber machine gun, and the tank starts backing up in reverse. Typically, the reverse speed on T-72 tanks is relatively slow at about 4 kilometers per hour, but that's not always the case. It's unclear why they don't open up with their main tank gun, but it seems like they might be out of ammunition or the system is down and broken. We're not sure. So the Russian column of artillery, Ural supplied trucks, and infantry is headed straight at the Ukrainian tank at this point at point blank range. This shows the fog of war at its finest, I think. Complete chaos and confusion of where the front lines are, where friendly forces are. Also, when both sides use the same type of equipment like this type of thing is bound to happen. The first truck is able to run the gauntlet. That Russian truck, it makes it past the Ukrainian tank. The second Russian supply truck, dragging some towed artillery, it looks like, also tries to drive past. Then an incoming round appears to hit the Dishka machine gun, and ammo starts to cook off, exploding everywhere. Or it might have just been a round cooking off from overheating from sustained fire. Either way, the gunner starts reloading the ammo right away, and we get this really awkward moment served up to us where the tank gunner makes this awkward eye contact with the Russian supply driver as it moves by just 10 feet away. What happens
so
next
crazy.
in quick succession is wild. An artillery round hits 50 meters in front of them, unsure if it's friendly or enemy. Then a Russian MLTB, which is like a tracked vehicle, also tries to pass right in front of the tank of the Ukrainians and has some infantry riding on top, so they're actually taking shots with their AKs. To the right, directly in front of the tank, you can see Ukrainian infantry firing rounds at those Russians. Then an incoming round hits the top of the Dishka machine gun, and you can see in slow motion the gun gets rattled and the gunner takes cover inside the tank. That footage really shows how unpredictable war can be sometimes. Your main gun goes down, your second gun goes down, you have no idea who is who, it's just wild. And the next engagement is some high-definition drone footage of a tank duel. Here, 2 Ukrainian tanks are laying in wait behind the tree line for the 3 Russian tanks to show themselves. They have communication with the drones that's overhead, which is giving them a full picture of the battlefield. And the first thing that stands out to me is that today, all these tanks would be droned pretty hard straight to the face by now. The tank takes 3 quick shots.
Nice. Wow, and gets 2 out of 3.
Knocks out 2 of the Russian tanks, while one of the Russian tanks escapes. This next battle is footage that was posted on United 24 Media's channel originally. It shows a column of Russian armor moving down in on an assault. It's made up of 3 tanks for the firepower and 4 armored personnel carriers that bring the infantry. The old tactic back then a few years ago was for the Russians to regroup in a village.
Old tactic right before the drones really stepped into the battle.
Before they would launch their attack. So we see here the Russian tank with the arrow next to it is being currently targeted. A Ukrainian armed with a Western javelin missile launcher fires from about 2 kilometers away, and then the missile travels there. And boom, the top-down explosion in the background is that tank getting knocked out.
1 by 1. Oh.
There is a lot to be learned from this next firefight, though. It's actually a Russian assault with over 100 armored vehicles, maybe one of the largest armored mechanized assaults ever caught on camera.
Yeah.
It starts with 20 Russian armored vehicles preparing for the push. They storm forward, trying to get to the zero line, and their goal is to destroy the Ukrainian trenches. But the problem is, there's only a few avenues of approach for them, which creates these choke points. And we can see here is where they're staged, and here are the 4 different avenues of approach that they're going to take to the front. But Ukrainian forces have already sighted them in ahead of time with artillery and javelins. This is before drones became prevalent. One of the cluster bombs hits directly on a Russian tank, and more of the roads are blocked off by more and more destroyed vehicles. What follows is footage that I think reveals a ton about armored combat and how it's changed to nowadays, because this has become so rare and has been entirely replaced by infantry assaults this year. It's an absolute slugfest. We can see there are rows upon rows of Russian tanks getting taken out by HIMARS attacks, artillery. The Russian tanks push forward, get knocked out, and it causes a whole column to get stopped dead in its tracks. Russian tanks with mine clearing equipment push up to try to avoid those mines, and they try to clear a path. We could see a Congo line of other armored vehicles attempting to push forward and getting stuck. This same exact thing happened to the Ukrainian Bradleys when they tried assaulting a well-prepared defended position as well. It's just not possible in today's day of drones and precision artillery and missiles.
It's pretty much over for the tanks. Like, the tanks are done. Like I said, way over 90% of the tank battles are, it's like you said, it's super rare. You don't see tank on tank battle anymore. It's all about drones. And I just never going back to the tank era. It's over, it's done. And I think that was one of the biggest mistakes Russia did, thinking to invade Ukraine, thinking that doing it like the old way of World War II, just send out all these tanks and like overwhelm your enemy. it just didn't work, right? Like the drones came in and the battle has changed forever. We'll never see tanks again like this. So tanks are becoming relic of old history. Slowly, they're still out there, but very slowly they are. They end up in museums. A lot of these tanks are already in museums for decades, and we're only going to see more of them. So people are going to look back in the 50 years from now and be like, wow, these big old clunks were roaming the battlefield, and that's how the war was 50 years ago or whatever. They'll still have tanks, right? Don't get me wrong, but they'll be like these weird tanks with like drones coming out of them, like a swarm of drones gonna come out of the tank and then like clear the path. Like it's gonna get weird. So I don't know, maybe tanks will stay. It's just the drones are just gonna help out the tanks, right? And then there's so many people that are just obsessed with tanks. Like there's people that I know that have like, you know, those toy tanks and they collect them and they're obsessed with them. I mean, people are obsessed with basically anything nowadays. So there's always gonna be this thing for tanks. Once again, we know who the invader is. Ukraine is protecting their home. And don't forget to subscribe. Підпишись безкоштовно. Make sure to like the video.